She walked into the secure operations room like she didn't belong because technically, she didn't. No uniform. No clearance badge. No military posture. Just a woman in civilian clothes, mid-30s, olive-toned skin, high cheekbones, and a calm, unreadable face. Her black hair was tied back in a loose bun, and she wore a fitted gray blazer over a dark blouse that didn't quite match the military efficiency surrounding her. Everyone turned to look, some with raised eyebrows, others with subtle smirks. Civilians didn't just wander in here. But she didn't hesitate. She moved past the officers and analysts gathered around the war table and positioned herself near the wall-mounted monitors without so much as a glance at the stairs behind her. General Camden, the ranking officer in the room, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this is a secure zone. I'm going to need to see." "I know exactly what this is," she said, cutting him off gently but firmly. "And I know what you're about to do. Which is exactly why I'm here." That silenced the room more effectively than any rank could have. The operation playing out on the central screens was a nightmare in real time. A long-range missile launch had been detected in a coastal region controlled by a rogue state. Intelligence suggested it was armed, possibly nuclear. Protocol dictated retaliation if verification wasn't received within the next 3 minutes. She scanned a telemetry feed without speaking, then turned to the comms officer. "Your confirmation algorithm is wrong. You're looking at a ghost signature. There's no warhead." The young man blinked. "I'm sorry, who?" "Override it. Open channel 7B and reroute through the West Satellite Array. You're missing the heat bloom cutoff because you're running last year's prediction model." Camden stepped forward, bristling. "Who the hell are you to make demands in my operations center?" "I'm the reason your retaliation order hasn't already killed 13,000 people, she replied flatly, eyes still fixed on the screen. There was a beat of silence. The war room held its collective breath. Then, with no small amount of skepticism, the comms officer did as instructed. Within seconds, a new telemetry overlay flickered onto the screen. And just like that, the threat signature disappeared. Not diffused. Not intercepted. Gone. The room erupted. Shouts. Confusion. Camden snapped for a systems check. Another officer barked into a headset, demanding confirmation from Satellite Command. The projection wall blinked rapidly as alternate data streams fed in. One by one, they confirmed the same thing. No missile. No launch. It was a decoy. Camden turned toward the woman, but she was already walking out. "Wait, hey! Who authorized you to access satellite rerouting?" She paused by the door, finally turning back. Her voice dropped slightly, enough to make the whole room fall silent again. "I wrote the rerouting protocol. 10 years ago. Under a different name. And then she was gone. That was the first time most of them saw her. The last time many of them underestimated her. Her name was Alara. At least, that was the name she used now. Her government file was thin by design. No standard employment history. No military service. No known security clearance. Just a decade-old consulting contract with DARPA and a string of advisory notes scattered across projects in cyber defense, quantum telemetry, and deep surveillance. But those who really knew understood that Alara had been the invisible architecture behind some of the most sensitive operations in modern military history. She never wore a uniform. She never spoke at conferences. And yet, people with 4-star badges deferred to her in meetings they weren't supposed to be in. No one was quite sure how she got into the room she did. Only that once she was there, decisions changed. They said she had a talent for spotting patterns where others saw static. That she could read data streams like sheet music. That she understood machines better than the people who built them. But what unnerved people the most was that she never acted like she wanted to be part of the system. She operated beside it. Around it. Occasionally, above it. 3 months before the missile room incident, she had been consulting quietly out of a dimly lit workspace in Munich, reverse engineering signal packets from deep-sea sonar disturbances that didn't match any known geological pattern. 2 weeks after she flagged them, a rogue sub was intercepted near the Norwegian trench with unregistered launch tubes and Russian tech modified beyond spec. A month before that, she had cracked a series of encrypted distress beacons buried inside commercial air traffic logs, beacons that led a UN rescue team to a hostage camp no satellite had ever seen. But in all those operations, she never touched a weapon. Never commanded a team. Never asked for recognition. She just noticed things. And intervened before others realized what they were missing. Back in Washington, the Joint Signals Command started digging. Camden had demanded a full report. Who was she? How did she gain access? Who let her in? But the deeper they dug, the stranger the story became. A low-level analyst finally stumbled on a detail buried in a 2007 prototype manual for satellite path prediction models. A small appendix note marked EK Mod Rev 1.4 with an author tag that read, "Initial logic courtesy of Alara K." Cross-referencing that name led to only one archived employment ID from a classified lab that had burned down in 2009. No digital backups. No personnel files. Just a 3-line reference from a fire incident report that noted Alara K was presumed off-site at the time. But no one had heard from her since. Until now. Camden stared at the file, then pushed it away. "This isn't an analyst," he said. "This is a ghost." The next morning, Alara was already gone from D.C. She traveled light, no suitcase, no security team, no trail. Only a leather-bound notebook with old symbols in the margins and a worn passport tucked between the pages. She moved through airports like they were train stations, never stopping long, never repeating a route. Because for people like her, staying in one place too long was dangerous. The call she had made in the war room had saved lives, yes, but it had also revealed something far more important. Someone was testing the system. And someone knew she still existed. The footage wasn't supposed to exist. But it did. Buried inside a secure, off-grid data node in Northern Virginia, a facility so compartmentalized that even its janitors required Tier 3 clearance, was a 5-minute clip of surveillance video dated 3 years ago. No timestamp. No metadata. No classification header. It showed a woman, Alara, entering a private defense contractor's headquarters in Berlin. She bypassed security without a pass, greeted no one, walked straight into a conference room mid-meeting, and placed a sealed envelope on the table. She said 3 words to the board of directors. No sound. Just lips moving. Then she left. Exactly 49 hours later, the company's main server farm shut down. Permanently. Its experimental weapon guidance division was dissolved. 3 executives resigned without explanation. And no official record was ever filed. That footage had remained hidden until now, until a man named Grayson Myers, Deputy Director of International Threat Analysis, requested a full background trace on the woman who canceled a launch with her voice. His team had seen Alara's face before. Not in active military databases. Not in personnel archives. But in fragments. Pieced together from old clearance projects. Black files. Legacy systems long since wiped. And every time her name appeared, something vanished soon after a program shut down, a server purged, an asset quietly removed from the board. Alara wasn't just good at identifying threats. She was good at erasing them before they had names. But now she was being watched. For days after the missile room event, a man in a long coat followed her through a market street in Marrakesh. He kept his distance 7 seconds behind, never closer, adjusting his pace every time she paused to examine produce or speak to a vendor. She never looked back. But halfway through the narrow alley leading to her hotel, she stopped. "I assume you're not here for oranges," she said without turning. He smiled. "Miss K, I was told you had eyes in the back of your head." "I don't. Just instincts." "Which means you're not local. Too quiet. Too interested in the patterns, not the people." He stepped closer. "You disrupted a Tier 1 launch protocol. That makes you interesting." "Only to people who don't understand how broken that system is," she replied. He reached into his coat. Slowly. Deliberately. Not for a weapon. A sealed envelope. "Then maybe you'll want to see what's about to break next." That night, in her hotel room, Alara sat cross-legged on the bed, the envelope open on the mattress beside her. Its contents were precise. Clinical. 3 photographs, a schematic, and a data key. The photos showed a small military facility on the edge of a desert. Isolated. Forgettable. Except the image had been enhanced to show heat signatures underground. The schematic revealed part of a satellite relay array. Not the official network. Not any system used by NATO, NORAD, or Space Command. This was Rogue. Built beneath the surface. Shielded from sky and scan. And the data key? It contained a simulation of projection that, when modeled across current global defense algorithms, pointed to a terrifying conclusion. A missile could be launched, appear hostile, and vanish before confirmation, triggering an automatic retaliation from a NATO member AI without any human verification. It wasn't just a vulnerability. It was bait. A digital tripwire designed to start a war by mistake. And it was almost operational. Alara closed the file slowly. She had seen parts of this plan before, whispered in failed prototypes, hinted at in overwritten test logs. But she hadn't known anyone had actually built it. Until now. The next morning, she was on a flight to Lisbon. She didn't use her name. She didn't check a bag. The man in the coat didn't follow. Not visibly. But when she arrived at a tucked-away safe house built into the bones of an abandoned telecom station, there were already 2 people waiting. Neither introduced themselves. One was former MI6. The other? Unclear. Maybe Mossad. Maybe freelance. But both of them had the same question. How the hell do you plan to stop a war before it starts? She looked at them for a long moment. Then simply replied. I pull the plug before they finish the wiring. What she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that this wasn't the first time. Years ago, she had walked away from a project buried so deep in the US CyberOps program that it didn't even have a code name. It was designed to replace human judgment in conflict scenarios with real-time algorithmic threat response. They wanted machines that could make war decisions faster than people could hesitate. Alara had built the core logic. And then she had burned it. Not metaphorically. Literally. She shut down the lab's mainframe with a targeted EMP pulse she had designed as a failsafe, one that only she knew existed. She destroyed every byte of source code. Deleted all backups. Erased the AI's mind before it learned how to calculate acceptable losses. Because the math had been wrong. And no one else had noticed. Or cared. Now, years later, she saw echoes of the same logic creeping back into a new system. Different players. Same arrogance. But this time, she wasn't alone. By nightfall, she was staring at the schematics again, only now, they were displayed across 3 decrypted laptops, all air-gapped and powered by portable batteries. The Rogue satellite node was weeks from completion. It had no global designation, no registry, no uplink tag. But it had power. And power always had a trail. You're thinking too modern, the MI6 agent said, watching her sketch calculations in a notebook. These people don't operate on fiber optics. They use 80s tech legacy systems. Stuff no one scans anymore. Exactly, she replied, circling a junction box on the blueprint. And if I'm right, they'll have to test their link before launch. A dry run. Low orbit. High encryption. And you plan to intercept that? No, she said calmly, I plan to reroute it, to themselves. The room fell silent. It took a moment for them to realize what she meant. She wasn't going to block the system. She was going to trick it into attacking its own node, a digital false flag triggering an internal lockdown and possibly burning the entire project from the inside. Risky. Reckless. Possibly suicidal. But effective. If she could get close enough. The desert wind screamed across the exposed metal of the satellite uplink station. On the surface, it looked like a forgotten communications bunker, sand-caked, sun-bleached, unmanned. But beneath the hatch near the old generator vents was a 6-level structure humming with silent danger. This was the launch node. And Alara was already inside. She had entered through a buried maintenance shaft used decades ago by Soviet telecom engineers. It was no longer on blueprints. The guards didn't patrol it. But she knew about it because 15 years ago, she had helped write the original safety documentation for the European network this node had been built on. Her signature was still on the inspection form. Irony didn't slow her down. She moved through the dark with calculated pace, a small device on her wrist mapping heat signatures and soft pulses. 2 guards. 1 camera blind spot. 1 server vault. The layout was elegant in its simplicity. And terrifying in its implications. The relay wasn't just operational. It was live. At the heart of the node was a circular chamber bathed in the cool glow of terminal lights. At the center, the uplink control, marked only by a warning plaque in Cyrillic and English. Authorized access only. Automated strike validation network active. Elara approached it without hesitation. She removed a small case from her satchel. Inside, a drive no bigger than a stick of gum, carbon-shielded, air-gapped, loaded with a custom payload of her own design. She inserted it into the auxiliary port and waited. The screen blinked. Initiating look-back simulation. Target, node origin, local. Authorization key. Valid. Signal uplink. Engaged. System response. Live trigger detected. The room lights dimmed for half a second. That was all she needed. From 5 miles away, in a secure RV buried beneath a camouflage canopy, the MI6 agent and his Mossad partner watched as their signal monitor exploded with data. "She's done it," the Israeli muttered. "The node just locked itself out of its own satellite. It thinks it's under attack. And it can't confirm the source," the Brit added. "Because the signature is its own." They looked at each other. Then at the real-time feed from the overhead drone. Seconds later, internal alarms lit up the node's interior. Not from Elara's presence, but from the node's own AI thinking it had been compromised. Inside, Elara moved fast. She withdrew the drive, powered down the terminal, and activated the final stage of her plan. From her satchel, she pulled out a tiny black orb no larger than a coin. EMP. Non-lethal. Short range. But devastating to electronics. She activated it with a thumb press, counted to 5, and dropped it into the wiring grid beneath the terminal. She was 10 steps into her escape route when the pulse hit. The lights died instantly. Screens shattered. Circuits fried. The launch AI collapsed and on itself its final instruction corrupted beyond recovery. It would never reboot again. But her timing wasn't perfect. As she emerged into the corridor, a guard rounded the far corner drawn by the alarms. Their eyes met for half a second. He reached for his comms. She threw a flash device. White light bloomed. By the time his vision cleared, she was gone. Above ground, night had fallen. The desert air had cooled. She emerged from the shaft with nothing but dust on her hands and a burn on her left forearm where she'd brushed a live panel during the escape. She didn't flinch. Pain was secondary. Proof of success. Back in Lisbon, 2 days later, the woman once known only as a consultant sat quietly in a conference room across from the Deputy Director of International Threat Analysis. Grayson Myers looked older than he did in photographs. Tired. Hollow-eyed. He slid a file toward her. "You know what this means," he said quietly. "That I made enemies," she replied. "That you stopped something no one else even saw coming." He paused. "Why didn't you just tell us? Bring it to NATO directly?" Elara gave him a look that could have cracked glass. "Because you would have debated it until it launched." Myers tapped the file. "The AI is destroyed. The launch code scrambled. No one will admit this system existed." "They shouldn't," she said. "The system was a virus with a kill switch aimed at all of us." He nodded. "We owe you." "You don't." "Not yet." She slid her own envelope across the table. "There's another node. Off the Horn of Africa. Not operational. Yet." He opened it. Reviewed. Went pale. She stood to leave. "I'll need a clean passport," she said. "I'll need approval," he replied. "You don't have time." She walked out without waiting for permission. 3 weeks later, a NATO operations report filed under routine infrastructure reassessment noted the dismantling of a non-compliant communications tower in international waters. No further detail was provided. No names attached. And no one ever officially acknowledged how close they came to a conflict that would have rewritten maps. But those in the know? They remembered a woman in civilian clothes who walked into a war room and silenced generals. Not with a gun. Not with rank. But with knowledge. And the willingness to act when no one else would.